One of the best universities in the world is Yale University in the United States. It frequently tops lists of the best places in the world to study. It seems to have a connection with the Indian cities of Chennai and Madras. The establishment of Yale University was made possible by Elihu Yale, the Madras governor. And how was the money used to fund Yale University? Was this money obtained through the slave trade? So to answer the question, stay with us and watch the video till the end. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to get notified of future videos. Getting back to the video. For more than 300 years, Yale University has expanded and changed, reaching significant milestones and creating traditions along the way. The university's history may be traced back to the 1640s, when colonial priests spearheaded an initiative to build a local college in the vein of the liberal arts of Europe. A charter to establish a college school was approved by the Connecticut Assembly in 1701. In 1718, in honor of Welsh trader Elihu Yale, who had contributed the proceeds from the sale of 9 bales of merchandise along with 417 books and a portrait of King George I, the school was called Yale College. According to some of the theories, Elihu Yale, the governor of Madras in the 1680s, used the money he wasted in India on corruption and the slave trade to build Yale University. Prior to the details about the main issue, why not tell you some of the basic and personal information about Elihu Yale? Elihu Yale was born in Boston, Massachusetts. He studied in London after his family relocated to England. Yale's life was completely transformed when he joined the East India Company (EIC). A monopoly on trade with India was held by the East India Company. The company, with its head office in London, dispatched a ton of personnel to India in an effort to generate quick cash. A little piece of land in South India named Madras was acquired by Andrew Cogan and Francis Day. They constructed St. George Fort, the first British fort in India. The East India Company (EIC), which was expanding its influence on the Indian subcontinent at the same time, managed company shipping, which among other cargo carried enslaved people across the Indian Ocean in a slave trade with a smaller volume than that of the Atlantic world from its factories along the coastlines. Elihu Yale and his council bowed to pressure from their Mughal hosts and neighbors to forbid the purchase or shipment of slaves from Chennai or nearby ports on pain of fines in 1688 while serving as governor and president of Fort St. George, the East India Company factory at Chennai, then known as Madras. However, it is unclear to what extent this policy was ever enforced. Yale took over as the first governor of Madras in place of Andrew Cogan. Yale engaged in private trade, something the EIC banned. Yale, who serves as the chief judge of St. George Fort, was also corrupt and took a bribe in order to resolve conflicts. He overcharged EIC for the lease by using an exorbitant land cost, and he deposited the extra cash into his own account. Yale issued orders requiring 10 slaves on cargo ships bound for Europe while outlawing the slave trade in India. Yale benefited financially from the slave trade industry. The EIC's London headquarters received word of the money earned through unlawful means. He was urged to leave his position as governor of Madras and return to London by the EIC. When Yale arrived back in London in 1699, he made a sumptuous palace his home. It is also unclear how much Elihu Yale earned directly from his participation in the Atlantic or Indian slave trade. The disappearance of his personal files has further hampered efforts to learn this information. Yale undoubtedly gained fortunes through private endeavors, including the extractive and exploitive trade in precious stones, which created enormous wealth on the backs of cheap labor, like many EIC agents. Yale ultimately made his way back to England after being removed from the EIC leadership in 1692, where he posed for this portrait. Also, he gave to the Collegiate School of Connecticut, which changed its name to Yale College in appreciation for the donations that had made him the school's biggest supporter. In England, Yale showed off his wealth with the artwork, elegant clothing, and ruby ring he wore in this portrait that he had collected from all across the British Empire. Wealthy Brits from the 18th century, like Yale, were commonly depicted with enslaved children who were dressed stylishly and frequently wore collars. These youngsters were obtained through burgeoning slave trades in East India and West Africa. They acted as indicators of the primary protagonist's social standing in the portraiture. Yale's position and fortune were nevertheless enhanced by the presence of the slave boy, even though it is still unknown if Yale owned him. Nevertheless, it is undeniable that Elihu Yale felt at ease having his image painted alongside those who were clearly enslaved. Even in London, where the law did not allow for the existence of chattel slaves, Yale and his sons-in-law chose to have their portrait taken next to an enslaved child over whom they would have claimed ownership. His relatives in New Haven owned slaves. The company he worked for oversaw slave shipping in the Indian Ocean, and he was a slave owner himself. As part of a bigger effort to shed light on the connection between Yale University and slavery, Yale University, one of the oldest and wealthiest institutions in the United States, has commissioned its own inquiry into Elihu Yale and his connections to slavery. At the request of Cotton Mather, who was on the lookout for affluent contributors, a donation was made during the foundation of Yale University in Connecticut, which is another item mentioned in the Yale Corner. He might have been informed that Elihu Yale was born in Boston, despite the fact that Yale's family left North America shortly after his birth and he never went back. Yet, word of Mather's extravagant expenditure on his daughter's weddings to Welsh-landed aristocrats Susan and Catherine must have gotten out. In 1718, Yale received a gift request from Cotton Mather to help keep the college operating in Connecticut, America. 600 books, a picture of King George I, and some other items came from Yale. The college administration sold them for £800 and used the money to build a new building that was given the Yale name. As the college expanded, Yale University became the name of the entire campus. 1968 saw the repair of St. Mary's Church in St. George's Fort thanks to donations from Yale University alumni and the American ambassador to India. This church is where Yale was married and it has a plaque honoring him there. Even today, visitors to St. Mary's Church are directed to a tucked-away area in the back where the young Yale's contribution of 20 pagodas or gold coins to the church's construction is commemorated. This was equivalent to 3/4 of his then current pay. Perhaps by marrying Catherine Hanmers, the widow of a wealthy merchant who also happened to be his best friend, he atoned for his transgression. The first wedding at St. Mary's occurred with Yale. Before he could fulfill his vow to make a sizable donation, Yale passed away. The sales of the books, magnificently printed clothing, and successfully detected weapons that had survived him brought in a pitiful £562, but this was enough to make him famous. In his bequest, Yale included a charming epitaph dedicated to the memory of his wealthy widow. Another often told tale is that Yale's son, David, became unexpectedly ill when he was just 3 years old. The young child, who was in delirium, briefly opened his eyes and whispered, "Promise me that you will create a magnificent school in my honor." Fort David was the name the grieving father gave to a fort at Cuddalore. That was all for today's video. Tell us your views in the comments section. Also, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, remember to subscribe to the channel for more amazing videos. We'll see you soon in the next video.